All right, so this week we're going to be talking about inking and spotting blacks. Just a little bit of a history with inking in comics. It used to be really necessary to take this pencil drawing and then ink it so that it would show up for the printers back in, ye olden comics times. And also it was more of an assembly line kind of deal where, there'd be a writer, a penciler, an inker, a letterer, an editor, all that stuff. Um, and of course we're all kind of doing that work ourselves, so it's more of like a contained thing of just one person kind of doing all that stuff. But and most superhero comics still, or mainstream comics still kind of have that assembly line setup. um, and it's good to remember that this isn't just kind of like tracing. It's more of you're embellishing the drawing that you have, so you're not just tracing the lines. You're going to be um, trying to bring something out of the pencils. You're not just going straight over it. You're trying to add something new to it each time you go over these pencils, just in the same way that when you do a layout, you add something new when you put the pencils on top, and then when you do the pencils, you're adding something new by putting the inks on top. um, and so as far as spotting blacks goes, to me it's, and for most cartoonists, it's just a way to use large black areas, or even just little bits of black, to lead the eye around the page. And you can use it, it's a design thing and it's a storytelling device. So I'm just going to go over some examples of what we're going to be of different inking utensils that we're going to be talking about. The main thing I use is a brush, just because I really like the flexibility and the kind of line variation you can get, and it's just smooth and it feels good to use. Inking is one of my favorite stages of cartooning, for sure. When you're getting a brush, you want to try and get something with real hair. And there are some that use like kind of a mix of real hair, or they're synthetic, but they use however they processed it to kind of mimic that real hair. And this one I think is just like a Blick brand brush with real hair. And I think it's a number 2 or a number 3. You can kind of, it depends. It depends like kind of who you are and what you want to use. But this is a number 2, I think, watercolor round brush. Most of them are rounds. And then a nib, the one I'm using here, the nib is the little metal part, and then there's the nib holder. So the nib I'll be using, I think they're these Japanese brand that I got off of jetpens.com. But really anything that looks kind of like this will be really good. It's flexible, but it's strong. It just gives you really great line variation. If you want to look up the kind of nib that it is, there's some in the supply list. And this is a brush pen. This one actually has natural hairs in it. It's a little more expensive, but totally worth it if you're going to be doing a lot of inking, or you're really into using a brush. This one will probably run you like 30 or 40 bucks, but you can also get those Pentel brush pens that are like 10 or 15 bucks, and those work really well too. And these zebra pens are ones I just can't stop talking about. You can get them off of JetPens, and they're great just because they're easy to use. There's line variation. It just does a bunch of really cool stuff. And so I just want to go ahead and start talking about some people who use these different utensils. One of my favorite artists is Charles Burns, and he uses a brush primarily. And, it's just kind of amazing what he can do. The kind of roundness and all of the form and all the like the smooth and flowiness he can kind of get by just using 2 different tones. It's just black and white, stark black and white, with like not really any hatching, but just look at these different kind of like amazing organic beautiful kind of things he can get just by using a brush. And yeah, the way he uses black is really interesting, because most of the things he does, there's a lot of black in his pages. You'll see here how he's kind of spotting the character and spotting the blacks in this page. It's all in the background, and then there's this little sliver here of white. But for the most part, it's all black surrounding her, and then she's going into water, it's black. Same thing here, same thing here. Water gets a little bit white, brighter, and then she goes in and she's fully submerged into this black. And one thing about him too is his varied line weights. Well, he'll kind of start tapered off at a moment here, you know, and then it'll get a lot thicker going up here. And he's just a prime example of one of the most amazing brush inkers. Here's another page. Just look at the rendering in the hair. And again, spotting the blacks where she's the center of attention, then everything around her is kind of putting you toward the character. This big open white expanse, this beautiful brushwork here to show all that grass. He's able to get really, really detailed with how he inks with a brush. Moving on, this is Jillian Tamaki. You know, a little bit finer aligned and not as much black, right? But she's still using these black areas to kind of move you throughout the illustration. You know, the darkest area is centered around the character, and then over here centered around these characters. This one is beautiful as an illustration because she's a cartoonist and an illustrator. This is more of kind of like a free-flowing kind of thing, getting super brushy and dry brush. And here's one of her pages from this one summer. So you can kind of see the, you know, she's using a little bit of dry brush here, but mostly these pretty clean lines. It's not quite as like, you know, smooth and rendered as Charles Burns, but, you know, it's still just amazing drawings. Just using these black areas to focus you, move you through the page. You can see here, you know, starts you up here, down here, kind of zigzag this way, these black areas, showing a little bit on the character in the background, just a few things here, and then you end up here. Yeah, just using a lot less black here, but still moving you around the page. Like this one has nothing, but this one moves you over here, you know, just a little bit here, and then it's mostly surrounded by white. Just a little bit here on the character surrounding, and then here. She's pretty amazing. Then moving on to someone who uses a nib primarily. This is Noah Van Sciver. And just look at the different detail in his work. And, you know, not a lot of thick lines. All the lines have kind of the same basic width or thickness, but he's using this hatching style like in here to build up these areas of tone, right? Whereas like the skull here is all white, just stark white. And then he'll build up the darkness here and here. And this is just an illustration, but he's leading you through this page just by building up the hatching and the tones. And it's not like the most super, it's not the tightest rendered kind of hatching, but you know, it's giving, it still has life to it. You know, it's not just this kind of like flat, very slow. You can tell he's kind of moving pretty quickly as he's building up these different hatch marks. I just think it works beautifully. You know, it's, he knows when to kind of just be subtle and draw a beautiful figure, and then he knows when to really build up the hatching. And down here, you know, there's no hatching at all, but he's still using these spot blacks to move you through the page, starting with the character and then these books in the background. Just very, very simple. And then the rest of it is just these thin lines that he's using, which still have a lot of energy to them. And this is Eleanor Davis, another one of my favorites. Hers, she does like a pen and a nib and sometimes a brush, but this I think is more primarily pen and nib. And you can see like in the hair here, her, you know, very simple characters, but very emotive. And you can see that in this person's hair, and then over here, just the way she's leading you throughout the page with these spotted blacks, and just, you know, not as much as like, you know, not near as much as Charles Burns, and even less than Jillian Tamaki, but she is really leading you through just with these very graphic areas. And it's just, you know, she makes it look simple, even though it's very advanced and amazing. And just look down here, this graphic quality of all of this, you know, it looks like dusk, but she's just using two different tones. And maybe it is nighttime, but um, you know, just using all of these dark areas of like the trees and the houses and parts of the car to show, to really bring out the characters. Everything is so clear here. And here, just a few little areas. And, you know, she's not really varying her line width either, but she's getting a lot done with these, just one line width and then spotting these blacks to move you throughout the illustration. I like this one because you can kind of start up here and it moves your eye all around. You know, these are all, she's such an amazing artist that, you know, she's using these things in a very smart way. She knows how to compose an image to move your eye around. Look at how much, there's just a little bit of black here, you know, but it still circles you all the way back around on the illustration. And this is Ben Passmore, and you wouldn't know it maybe, but he uses a brush for everything. I think he might work primarily digital these days, but he still makes his digital work look like his line work, his traditional line work. And Ben is just so smart. You know, he's using, even here, like kind of a primarily a single width for his brush lines, but he's using little areas of dark, you know, to kind of show you where the shadow would be hitting, because, you know, primarily shadow is going to be below things when you're drawing people, and light is coming from above, right? So he just has these little areas and little variations in the line too, like especially on the legs here, you know, thicker lines here, a little thinner here. But he's making all of it very clear, and there's still so much life and body to it. Like, you know, it doesn't look like he's using a ruler for the straight lines that he's doing on non-organic materials, but you know, they're still straight enough, but you can still see like a bit of his hand in it right here, and it's just kind of a beautiful quality. Over here, just look at how he's using these black hatch marks to kind of move your eye. Same thing here. Everything's kind of focused here. A little bit, few things down here. Just very, very smart image maker. This is Chris Brunner. He's more of a mainstream superhero artist or a genre artist, but he's kind of a master at inking. And you wouldn't know it, but he uses mostly Micron to build up everything. And that's a single point. So he's using this Micron to kind of build up all of his lines. And I think the way he works is by kind of outlining everything. And then he goes in and he fills everything with a brush, or in some cases, maybe like a marker in here. But just, you know, these are so masterful in how he's used the spot blacks to bring everything out, and also really show you where the character should be, and just to emphasize where the character is. Like, look at the character surrounded here. Here it's just a silhouette, light coming in here. Then you got Mr. Batman down here. Just a few little black areas in the background to move your eye a little bit through the panels, but primarily here because the focus is Batman. But you know, he's done all this amazing work in the background that he wanted you to see these little areas of interest, you know, before you settle on good old Batman. This is Marnie Galloway. She's really masterful with a nib and with a pen. You know, this gets into more like the detailed work, but she's still using areas of spotted black just to really pop things out. And this one is just so intricate and beautiful. This is from her book, In the Sounds and Seas. This is the kind of rendering you can get with a nib, though. Very delicate, and then you can go in with these larger areas of black to pop things out. And tonally kind of using these different areas of hatching, but she's not really cross hatching too much. It's kind of one directional, you know. It's kind of like, and then boop, boop, boop. But if she wants to build it up, it seems like she just varies how many there are next to each other, you know, to get that kind of gradation, which is kind of a beautiful, elegant way to do hatching. Here's some of her work. This is from her book. It's so beautiful. Still these areas of spot black, but also really building it up with these hatch marks. She's a master. And then this is Alec Longstreth, who is also a nib guy. Just amazing detail, and similar to Marnie, where there are spots of spot black, you know, like on the characters or in the background here. But then there's a lot of stuff where it is building up the hatching. And some of these look very one directional too, where it's like this. And I'm actually not even sure how he's getting some of these gray tones, but it's pretty amazing. But again, still using these areas of spot black to lead you throughout the page. You know, someone who's not as good at this, you could get really lost in these pages, but there's so much detail, but you're looking at all the areas you need to be looking at just in the way he's varied the tones. And that top panel, not much hatching, you know, but there is a lot of, it's still very clear. This is Sophie Goldstein. So she uses a brush and she's so clean with it, and she still has so much energy to it. So it's almost like an animation style for indie comics. That's kind of how I think about it. But the way she composes a page and the way she composes her panels, especially here, I love this panel, the way she's using spot blacks just to show you a few things of this woman getting dressed. You know, nothing here, just very simple, and then moving on to this, and then her corset, shoes, nothing here, and then ends there. I just think it's so lovely. I guess you'd say this is an amazing economy of line for Sophie Goldstein. Here, using a lot more, but it's all graphic. It's all placed exactly where it needs to be to move your eye to all the interest in each panel. So, you know, here you'd probably start here, and then you'd end up here. There's another one by her. You know, no spot blacks, no cross hatching, but just rendering with the brush. And then that bottom panel, that's kind of like, you know, creating this moment with the spot blacks, creating this, you know, showing the blood of the fish, and everything before that was very stark, very linear. And then mostly tons and tons and tons of graphic white. And then, you know, the fish in the last panel gets slapped down, and it's the only thing that has all this spot black. So not only is it a graphic composition device, it's a storytelling device to kind of bring in this moment of, you know, this bloody fish. You're using all of this black area. And so that's it for examples. Just make sure you check out my inking demos where I go over using a brush, and I go over using a nib, and I go over using a brush pen, and then also just a regular pen. Check it out.